Hey, welcome everybody out there. So welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline Podcast. I am Shayna Terrell. I'm the Director of Pipeline Programming at the Center for Black Educator Development. Welcome everybody to our fourth episode. So I am Shayna Terrell, an educator activist. I am originally from the Bronx, New York, and I made my way to Philadelphia to get out here and become an adult. I have dedicated my life to this work for fighting for freedom and liberation for my people. So this is really why I'm into this work and why I'm doing this work. So shout out to all of you out there who are watching and joining us today. The way I'm fighting for freedom and liberation right now is through 15 years of educator activism. That's the work that my fight is rooted in right now. I know I'm not alone in that fight at all. I know that currently I have some of you out there watching who are co-conspirators right now in the game. And a lot of y'all who are out here future co-conspirating, that's why you're watching the show. So I'm here for it all. At the top of the show, I usually run down a bunch of statistics and a couple of data points. But today I'm just going to focus on a few. One stat in particular from the past couple of shows that kind of jumps out at me every time I read it. Is there was a survey done and 52% of teachers felt like they were unprepared to deliver instruction. That was concerning to me. I think the biggest part of my concern was, what are we actually doing out here to support teachers or to make teachers feel like they're supported? Specifically, Black teachers. We know the attrition rate for Black teachers are much higher than their white counterparts. Most Black teachers leave the profession because they don't feel supported. But a major way to help Black teachers feel supported is by making sure that they are heard, making them feel like they are listened to. So to support Black educators, we have to listen to them. We have to elevate their voices and we have to validate their experiences. So if you're out there listening right now and you're a teacher, I need you to do something for me. Please comment in the chat. Please make a comment and share with us a time where you felt like your voice wasn't heard. And if you're not a teacher or not an educator, but you're a friend of one, so we already know we unload on you guys. When we're struggling or things are going wrong, we unload on you guys. You guys are our support system. So if you're a friend of an educator, please share with us a story that one of your educator friends have shared with you about a time that they didn't feel heard. So please share a story with us, comment in the chat. And the reason why that's important, we have folks watching live right now who are looking for ways to support Black educators and looking for ways in which folks didn't feel heard and how they can make that right. We have folks watching live. We have folks who watch our show later. So your stories are important for them to follow up on and read about. But we have to listen to Black educators because they matter. They matter. Their existence matters. Research proves that point. Black educators have a direct impact on not only students, but also teacher outcomes. Black students need Black teachers. But here's the thing. Black teachers aren't only good for Black students. They're good for all children, for all students, and for all educators. So we know that having at least one Black teacher in 3rd through 5th grade reduces a Black student's probability of dropping out by 29%. And we know that chance is even greater for Black boys. It reduces the number of dropping out by 39%. And when Black students have 2 Black elementary teachers, they are 32% more likely to go to college. But here's a new stat I'm dropping on y'all. When white teachers work in schools where there's at least 30% of the teaching force is Black, they are more likely to engage in culturally responsive practices. So once again, Black teachers matter, and they're not just good for Black students. They're good for students, and all teachers. So just the mere presence of a Black teacher can have a difference and make an impact. So we need to make sure that we're creating spaces to affirm Black teachers and that we're creating spaces that are physically and emotionally safe for them. That's our responsibility. So those all signs point to why Black educators matter. There are still schools in the United States right now that do not employ one Black teacher. So as we know, that's problematic. But shout out to Citizens Ed for giving the center, giving us this space, this opportunity to lift up these issues and use our voices in the educational community to work towards resolutions. We appreciate that. And I'm always going to shout out the work that we're doing at the Center for Black Educator Development, because we are aiming to build a comprehensive Black teacher pipeline because we want to diversify the current pipeline. Our 4 main pillars and how we do that work is pipeline programming by strengthening pathways to teaching, developing culturally relevant pedagogy, innovative professional learning, and advocating for critical public policy. We hope to use the 4-4-4 model, so supporting educators through a 12-year model that starts in high schools. We want to support them all the way through college and through their first 4 years of teaching. That's how we hope to bring about building the Black Educator Pipeline. And shout out to all the funders and all the partners and all the courageous people who were revolutionary enough to invest in this work. We thank you. So we are still rocking out, y'all, with Women's History Month and celebrating our sisters in education. As you know, this month's theme is the voices of Black women, building the educator pipeline. So I want to introduce y'all to 2 very dynamic ladies who co-founded Black Educators Matter. Friends or cousins, depending on who you ask, Brooke B. and Danielle Moneyham launched Black Educators Matter as a way to celebrate Black educators. Since February 2020, through their online Instagram community and Project 500 podcast, they space for Black educators to relax, recharge, regroup, and reconnect. This global ecosystem is rooted in affirming unapologetically Black relationships with the goal of making excellence equitable. Brooke B. is the community builder, a masterful DM slider who engages with diverse groups of stakeholders online, led by her HBCU bred activism and heart of service. Danielle Moneyham, interviewer of the people, is the host and producer of Project 500, and as a former recruiter, hopes to inspire the next generation of educators to pursue their careers in the field. Together, they love curating I love to say this, entertainment for the culture. So please welcome Danielle and Brooke. Welcome, ladies.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, Shayna. Hey, guys. Thanks for having us.
Oh, we are excited to have y'all. So first off, again, I want to thank you guys for the work that you're doing out there, hailing from Chicago. We appreciate the work you're doing, and we always appreciate having co-conspirators in the movement. So talk to us a little bit. What inspired you ladies to start Black Educators Matter?
You want to go first?
Well, I just want to say, because Shayna, earlier you dropped all of those stats. All of them talk about why Black educators matter, but you talked about like building that ecosystem and the fight. And one way that we do the activism in creating that ecosystem is through our newsletter, which is called The Great Fight. So we recognize everybody involved in this work is contributing towards this greater good. But Brooke, I will let you talk about why we started the organization and why this fight is important to us.
So there are a lot of organizations that exist that support like Black children or just children, period, within the school system. But there are none that solely support Black educators. So we were like, it's something missing here. Like we have too many, especially Danielle and I, we have too many colleagues that are educators that don't have the support they need. So at first, when we first started, it was like, we got to get, like a support group. We can throw conferences. Like we had all of these crazy and grand ideas, but then COVID happened.
Those are great ideas.
Thank you. But then, COVID happened. So a lot of the great ideas were, put on pause. But in addition to that, that's when the readaption came and Project 500 was created.
And our goal with Project 500 is to share the stories of 500 Black educators. In addition to creating the space to say thank you to Black educators and create professional development opportunities and networking opportunities and relaxing opportunities and just times to have fun, we wanted to document the actual stories of Black educators who were doing the work in various capacities. So when we say educator, we mean every grown-up in the building that is contributing towards the development and knowledge transfer and support of children. So teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, custodians, cafeteria workers, coaches, librarians, nurses, anybody, office staff, anybody that is in the building supporting students and outside of the building. So the different pathways that exist within education. So the people who work in advocacy, the people who work in outreach and community partnerships and community development. So we really just wanted to create this space, like Brooke said, to say thank you and to acknowledge the work that is being done, because Black educators are the cornerstone of our community, but Black educators really sow love and liberation through generations.
So there's two great points that both of y'all made, but one I want to hint on. Why is it so important to extend that definition of educator outside teacher or administrator or principal? Why is that important?
Because every single adult that pours into a child, that pours into a family, that pours into another adult, you are an educator. It was a student, it was a kid that said, if you can talk, you can teach. So everybody has some sort of gift that they can transfer and educate someone else with. So it's more than the classroom teachers. We know the classroom teachers are important, but we cannot forget about the others in that educational ecosystem that are moving the work forward and that are supporting kids and families and communities.
Yes. And then talk to me a little bit about this notion of you guys saw a space that wasn't solely for Black people, right? Because when we started to talk about Black people needing spaces or things of their own, that makes folks a little nervous, right?
Why?
Yeah, but so it's a two-part question. One, why do you feel like it was important to create a space specifically for Black people and Black educators? And how does that support and enhance their work?
So I went to an HBCU. So of course I'm like pro everything. Like,
are you going to name the one? Because I know you like this.
Absolutely am. Tennessee State University. Shout out to my Tigers. But yeah, so there are so many nuances that are associated with being Black. Adding an educator to that, there's something that, because I was in the field and I worked with both sides. I worked at an all Black school. I worked at a not so all Black school. So I saw the differences between the way the educators were supported. So I was like, they're not getting what they need. So I knew that something separate, and I don't necessarily want to say all Black, because there are some people, who are doing anti-racist work, who are really with the movement. We have so many non-Black supporters. So I don't want to make it seem like, we're just not, engaging non-Blacks right now. But at this moment, like, we're creating a space for Black educators.
And then that hitting on that question when he was like, why? Right? Have you guys in creating this space, have you guys came up against any kind of heat?
No.
Working hard to create a Black space for just Black educators? No. Have you felt any resistance?
I mean, you get the people who talk crazy to you in your comments, but other than that, like, we've had nothing but support. And if anything, and I don't want to say it's white guilt, but we have a lot of non-Blacks, DMing me, sending me messages outside of Instagram, like, I really love what you're doing. If there's anything I can do to contribute, let me know. So we definitely have their support. And unfortunately, the events of 2020 that were racially driven, because of those happened, they actually got to see an example of, the detriment of racism and how heavy it is. So because of that, we got a lot of like, okay, like, I see you all and I hear you all, and whatever we can do to, make this path easier, we're willing to. So as of right now, we haven't had any.
Yeah, and I will also say, in terms of education, there's a teacher shortage everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So any educator who understood what we were doing by saying this group of educators matter, this population matters, it's hard to fight against what we're saying, because we have the research to back it up. We know that the educational system in this country is inherently racist and broken. Every single adult will say that. Every single educator that we've interviewed has said in some way how this system is broken and or harmful. So it's just hard for someone to say, like, wait a minute, you all want to talk to Black educators and get their opinions and experiences about how they experience school as a kid, how they experience college on their journey to becoming an educator, and their true life lived experiences in the classroom and beyond. You can't dismiss that.
Agree, 100%. So in meeting and interviewing Black educators, because of course, like I've existed in an ecosystem with some, a lot of times Black folks feel like their voices are silent, right? Or they're not heard, or people are shutting them down. And, you know, the stats I named earlier, in 2 years, folks enter the profession and they're gone. And a lot of it is like, I didn't get the support I needed, and people just weren't listening to them. So in y'all road to education, have y'all ever experienced y'all voices being silenced, or people trying to shut you down?
I'll go. I spoke on this earlier, or just a little bit. I started off as an education major, but I student taught, and I was in a classroom one time, and like I felt so bad for the teacher, because she was, you know, she was extremely malmannered. She was a young Black woman, extremely malmannered, and the kids were going insane, like turning over desks. Like, it was really bad. And I was like, if these kids in Nashville acting like this, they're gonna tear me apart when I get back to Chicago. Following week, I changed my major, but I still had like this desire to, you know, do work with children. So I got into preschool. So I was a preschool teacher. And the time that I felt like I was being silenced was when I was getting ready to graduate. I went back to go talk to my manager. And mind you, this was some time ago. I won't tell, because I don't want to tell on myself how old I am. But early 2000s. I went to my manager and I was like, hey, you know, I'm getting ready to graduate. And at the time I was making $925. And I was like, I'm getting ready to graduate. Can we discuss my pay? And she was like, I mean, you're pretty much going to do the same thing that you're doing now. So I don't see why there needs to be a discussion. I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Wow.
Now, mind you, I had a kindergarten teacher that I was working with, and she literally had to like print out like documents showing, and this was a private preschool. So, you know, we got access to money that public schools didn't get access to. She had to pull up like actual documents showing like what an average kindergartner teacher like made. And only then were they willing to like take her pay to where it needed to be. So I was like, I'm not getting ready to, you know, argue with these people about my worth. So I left there and tried to go to another center, and they were offering me $8 an hour. So I was like, education might not be it. I might have to find somewhere to, you know.
And see, it's important for you to share that story. And would have been so important for that story to be shared publicly, because somebody wouldn't be able to grab you, mentor you, and help you before you left the profession. To say, you know, maybe early ed priest, like that ain't the way to go, sis. Let me get you an alternative program to rocket you into kindergarten and maybe first grade, so you can still work with the little ones and earn a living wage. But the fact that you were going through that and had to go through that alone, which then drove you to leave the profession, because you was like, hey, I gotta eat. You know what I'm saying?
And Sally wanted her money on time.
All of the student loans. That's a whole nother situation about Black folks trying to enter the profession, but drowning in student loans, and then dealing with a wage that they can't even pay back them student loans, right? I'm drowning. I'm gonna live, pay you, Sally, this $395 to $400 a month.
She wanted $426 from me. So
okay. I mean, I got people telling me sometimes leaving out of school, they student loans is over 100,000, right? Some of this is just undergrad before they even get to grad, which is insane. But you being in a situation where you were isolated in that situation, in that story, not being able to connect with other folks who could have guided you, is just detrimental, and it shows an importance and a need for us to continue to lift up Black voices and Black stories. I know for myself, being in situations in education and feeling like I was all alone. Sometimes I felt like I was in a crazy house, right? I felt a lot in student discipline. So in dealing with majority white teacher population and feeling like, hey, something about this situation don't seem right. But then I'm looked at a certain way if I'm advocating for children and not supporting teachers, but feeling very alone in that sense, and feeling silent sometimes by superiors on like, no, you got to support the teachers. If you don't feed the teachers, they'll eat the kids, right? I've heard things like that. I'm like, but the kids are already being eaten.
Yeah.
So feeling like an absence in somebody validating my experience, validating my voice, and lifting me up. But your story is very important to why folks need to be able to connect with young people, because this you were going through at the college level. Imagine if you would have had a mentor in that space. We probably would have had you in here teaching the education. I'm not going to say how many years, Boop, because you don't want me to. You know what I'm saying? But you would have been out here.
Yeah,
that was the goal of the podcast. Like Brooke said, we had to pivot since outside was closed temporarily. We had to create this internal way to engage with people. But there was a professional development that one of Brooke's cousins had done that she felt like if other Black professionals, if other young professionals had access to this type of professional development or coaching, maybe it would help them become stronger in their practice. Yes. Or maybe if we can learn a little bit from everybody and a little bit from each person's experience, maybe it will help us feel stronger and more connected and not as isolated in the work. I also think, kind of going back to what you said, Shayna, sometimes feeling silence, depending on the role, depending on your role in education or your role in the building, it can be very, very triggering. And everybody in the building may not have that same experience. Thinking about discipline, we just had an interview with an educator, and she talked about how she is working through the trauma that she had because she became the teacher they wanted her to be instead of the teacher that she authentically was. They wanted her to be the disciplinarian. Oh, you have great classroom management. Those kids know not to act up in your class. That's the only feedback she was getting. And she felt like she lost the trust of her students because instead of engaging with them as individuals, she became like this. I don't even have a word to describe what it means when you can't connect with somebody and you become like a disciplinarian. She felt like she was oppressing them instead of lifting them up. And that's really lonely. Like if you
she became an enforcer, right? So the word for that is you are an enforcer. She became an enforcer.
And who can be part, like you said, if you advocated for kids because you don't think that this policy is right in the first place, or you wonder if some of this language is harmful, or you got questions about the paper trail that the teacher submitted when they sent this referral over. Now, whose side are you on?
Yes. But this whole notion of your silence because it's teachers against kids is problematic. And what's very powerful in the story you just shared for that sister, they didn't only silence her voice, they silenced that sister's spirit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They ripped the life out of her, that I can't even be me. I have to be who you want me to be in order to exist in the profession. And how emotionally damaging is that for a person or for a sister? That's actually a really sad story. And I guess most of the stories that have been silenced are super sad. But we not only out here, it's really important to lift that up. They're not only silencing voices, like you silencing people's spirits, which is not okay.
Having that ecosystem or having a mentor or somebody safe that you can talk to or work through. But other times it's having the courage to be like, this is not it. Like, this is not it. This is not a good fit for me.
But then let's talk about that when you're saying having the courage. I think that's why a project like Project 500 is so important, because in order to have courage, it's very few who can stand alone. We highlight a lot of people, and just American indoctrination makes you single people out into individualism. But know that those people had a whole community of people lifting them up, right, and holding them up. But I think that what you guys are doing with Project 500 is so important, because for people to be able to have the courage and have the strength, they need a squad. They need a whole squad. So talk a little bit more in depth about Project 500 and why it's important to lift up the voice of Black educators in this ecosystem.
So I'll start, Danny. You can finish. And I love to tell this story because Danielle went to University of Illinois. And
at Urbana-Champaign.
And
okay.
the majority of our mutual friends also went to that school. But they had a march, a silent march that commemorated the first 500 Black students. It was 1968, right? So every year they would do this silent march, and I was down there visiting a cousin, and I was at that march, and that was my first time doing anything like that. So I'm like, man, like this is powerful. Like just imagine you're walking with like-minded people. You guys are all on the same agenda, and commemorating this great moment in history. So I literally still have the t-shirt, and this was probably 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was like my freshman year. Yep.
Yeah. So like 15 years ago. So when we were coming up with stuff, I said, Danny, we gotta bite it. I said, we gotta do Project 500. And so it just took off from there.
I will say, first of all, I attended Project 500 as a freshman at the University of Illinois, just wanting to be involved, understanding the campus history. It was an anniversary when, like Brooke said, 1968, the university admitted 565 minority students, but they couldn't live on campus. They had to live in the community. Like, so when the trauma, and when you think about it, it's like, wait, what? So yes, they admitted these students, but they couldn't live on campus. They had to live in the university. And then actually, there were, in 1968, there were Black students arrested as they participated in some of these movements. So like we even have the history of Project 500 up on our website. But we both went. So all these years later, me as a college student there, Brooke as a college student at an HBCU, but coming to visit, we didn't even know each other. We didn't see each other. We didn't know each other. So it was like years later, like 2 years later, I went down to visit Brooke at TSU with my roommate, who's her cousin. So when we went down there and Brooke was like, oh, I went to Project 500. I was like, what were you doing there? You don't go to U of I. And she was like, she had the shirt. I'm like, I don't even got a shirt. How you got a shirt? I don't know what I do with my shirt. But that Project 500 experience changed both of us. Like that going to that and participating in that movement really stayed with both of us. So when we were trying to figure out how can we shape this? How can we like really create something concrete that people can understand what we're doing and why we're doing it? Brooke was like, we got to do the Project 500. I'm like, you absolutely right. So that's how we came up with the goal of 500 stories, 500 Black educators. We've interviewed women, men, we've interviewed some couples, we've interviewed some friends. Our very first episode was some of our friends who went to an HBCU. We've interviewed people who've gone to community colleges. We've interviewed people who were career changers, people who knew they were going to be a teacher since they were 6, people who ran from the calling and somehow ended up in a position because mentors tapped them. Like everybody's journey into the classroom is different. And they talk about what their own educational experience was as a child, because that shapes how you enter the classroom. There were some people who were bused and had to go to school in a different neighborhood. There were some people like Brooke who loves her elementary experience.
I went to Beasley, all Black school.
Okay. No wonder why you loved it. You know what I'm saying? We wasn't all that fortunate.
Look, black principal, Black assistant principal. Like,
so you grew up on Black excellence.
Man, okay.
So you grew up on what we're trying to create right now.
Yes.
We want to replicate that for a lot of our students who don't see one Black teacher throughout their entire experience. And you talk about black principal.
Couldn't get away from it and loved every moment of it.
That's dope. But again, that they probably help drive some of the passion, right, that you have right now.
Absolutely.
So which some of you guys are doing with that Project 500, like being able to reach people who don't have what you have or who didn't have what you have, Brooke, is so important.
Yeah.
So from the stories that you heard, can you speak to some of the biggest challenges that some of the educators said that they may have faced in the profession?
Most recently, educators are starting to recognize and acknowledge the harmfulness of the system that we are operating in. So people will recognize that, yes, the system is broken, but there are some people who are able to navigate and make it through. There are some people who are successful. There are some people who are able to yada, yada, yada. But when you talk to enough educators, and especially enough historians, you know that education in this country is supposed to be a civil right.
Yep.
Every child is supposed to receive a quality education. Every child. And when you stop and you start to talk to educators and you're like, so what was your school experience like growing up? And what's your professional experience like in the schools where you're teaching? And you see the disparities, we all see like, okay, so this system is beyond broken. And sometimes in our roles, kind of like what I said earlier, we've perpetuated the harm. We, in our trying to be a good employee or trying to meet our own professional goals or do what we've been conditioned to do, which is be a good student, which is follow the rules. So like we end up doing things that once you sit back and you reflect on it, like that may have been harmful to a student. That wasn't helpful, or that was not affirming, or the language that we use when we send out our marketing material talking about the low income families we serve. What is a low income family?
And everybody in that neighborhood may not be low income. I say that all the time. Like, please watch the words that we're using to describe our families. Just because we're living in the low, I was one of those people. I lived in a low income neighborhood, but we were in a low income family. I had a 2 household, 2 working parents. We were far from low income.
It's just how it's incredible because we've not had time to sit down and look at the language that's used on our website or on our external relations materials. We've not sat down and looked at the curriculum and seen how white supremacy culture is enshrined in the curriculum that we are teaching our kids, and standardized testing, and how it's since the 90s they've been talking about how it's skewed. Why are we still playing this game? And I think that was part of the goal that Brooke and I had. And Brooke is much more, we're both fire signs, but Brooke is much more fiery than I am. And I'm like, Brooke, this is a problem. Brooke be ready to like flip a table over. Like,
listen, we need there's some spaces you go into, or you have to bring that energy. That energy is needed because they're bringing that energy for you. It may not physically look the same, right? And that's a whole nother show when we get into how they label us. It may not physically look the same, but they definitely are bringing that energy with their little pens, with their little policies, all of that stuff. So shout out to y'all for bringing that energy, because trust, they bringing that same energy.
They do bring that energy, especially when you talk about the labels and the labels that can follow a child from kindergarten throughout the rest of their lives. And then because the teacher said it, they believe it. So now they stand it and they've identified with it. And now because you've been told since you were 5 or 6 or 7 that you are problematic, or that you got a bad attitude, or that you're this, or you believe it. Why do you believe it? Your teacher told you, believe your teacher.
And then how important and passionate is it for students to be able to share that experience, but for parents to be able to have a platform to share that experience? Because once people are awakened, right, that's when the organizing and the change happens. But so many people are going through these problems in isolation and not knowing, right? I've been to meetings where parents are really questioning, like, do you really think he needs this service? Or do you think, like, can we try some other tactics before we go this route? Like, trying their best to advocate for kids. But again, what they're taught in American society is like schools are right and parents are wrong. Like, you're not the expert on your child. But to build platforms where parents can actually share these stories, where children can actually share their trauma and their harm, that can help and support other students. So the other thing I want to speak to, especially with the stories you were just sharing, y'all have a tagline, make excellence equitable. Can y'all talk a little bit about that?
So that was we probably came up with that way in the beginning, before we literally the founding time. And it was just like, once we started talking, we realized how the system works for who it's supposed to work for.
Yes.
So once we realized that, we like, okay, it's some work that needs to be done. And even though we knew we couldn't do it individually. We knew creating this ecosystem, like if we get enough fire under everybody, like community, like, get that sense of community, we can, flip that thing right where it's supposed to be and go and get some of that equity, for our children. But that was actually one of the founding principles
of make excellence equitable.
It also speaks to I have learned so many delicious phrases from the interviews with the educators. And when they say that Black people are not a monolith, like how excellence can look so many different ways. But if you only judge it by this standard, this is what excellence is. This is what beauty is. This is what language is. This is what, no, that's not true. And that's not fair. And if you really, I feel like I am a person who loves analogies, and I think about plants. I think that anybody who cares for plants, and Brooke has a little bit of a green thumb, but you cannot treat all of your plants the same.
They all can't take the same water either.
They cannot. Sometimes they need different size pots. They might need different size soil. Some need more light than others. Some need more water than others. Some can deal with heat. Some need cool. You can't treat all plants the same. So why would we treat all students the same?
Yes. Why we treat all students the same? Why do we feel like all Black students operate off a deficit perspective? Why do we feel like all Black students have the same experience? Sometimes there's just this assumed position that all Black students grew up in the struggle, when I'm raising Black children who are not in any kind of struggle in terms of like household, like they good. So my Black son don't need to keep reading about books where he coming from the struggle of the streets and got to overcome some type of, my friend is shot and in jail. He don't know nothing about that.
Yeah.
So that's that poverty porn. That's
yes.
the poverty
porn.
I
like that word. Hashtag poverty porn. Y'all like that. Talk about some poverty porn, sis.
Because even when you think about the origin story of Black people in this country and what we have learned from school, we just up from slavery. That's it. Just slaves and up from slavery, still down, but that's it. No. That's not where our story began. And it's Black educators, Black historians, Black archaeologists, Black everything that will tell you, like, no, before 1619, before the first boat went over there and brought some people back over here, and they did not bring slaves over here. And it took me to be like last year to finally sit and think like, man, all those slaves invented all that stuff, girl. That's because they was scientists and doctors and from families who had they brought that knowledge over here. And in fact, they tried to strip them of all the brilliance, tried to strip them of all of their humanity, and still they were able to create, because that is what we are. That's what we do. We are creators. They were able to still be who they were born to be. It's just they had to do it under a cloak of white supremacy culture and slavery. But yeah, it's the narrative too. It's the narrative for me. Black educators changed that. They show that so many things are possible.
Facts. Because what's like chilling about what you're describing about our history mirrors what our children are going through in public education, right? That people are stripping them of their originality. People are stripping them of their voices. People are stripping them of like their natural way of being and their natural way of learning, right? They're indoctrinated into a certain kind of culture and told that they should be a certain type of person and a certain type of student. So all of that is like super concerning when you are talking about that story and building the parallels of what that really means and what that means for our children. But something very powerful, right? Black people interrupt that narrative. They interrupt that systems. We are interrupters of that, especially when you're dealing with Black people who know who they are, who know what their worth is, who know that their history didn't start as slavery. Or I know who I am. I know who my people are. And everything doesn't always have to be about we were once kings and queens. Nah, we were scientists. We were mathematicians. We were inventors. We were business owners. We were farmers. We were builders. We were carpenters. Like, we were a bunch of things. So to strip that from my history and my narrative and make me think you brought me somewhere and gave me something, it's a hell of a thing, right?
Because I didn't ask for it.
I didn't want it, right? I didn't want it. but you gave it to me anyway.
Yeah.
The other connection that I like to build on that sometimes is the reason why Black educators matter and we need them in this space is because of education. And what I mean in education, the mind, right? So what are we putting in the minds of our children? Like how you control a child's mind is really what controls the trajectory of who they are and what they're going to be, and the importance of that. So who better, or who would I want in front of my child, teaching my child about them, their selves, and their worth than another Black person who's like-minded, like myself, rather than somebody who doesn't necessarily understand or aren't comfortable with my child and who they are.
And also someone who affirms you that looks like you so that you can start to realize that you can be the owner and expert and disseminator of knowledge. Not like, oh, my teachers are white women, so I trust the word of white women, because my whole life, white women had like, you're my teacher. And again, kids trust their teachers.
Yes.
Even parents trust the word of the teacher. And when we were talking about immigrant families, there have been so many times where immigrant families do not even necessarily know how to advocate for their children. They just trust the word of the teacher.
Yes.
So like, it's a lot. It's just a lot.
So, and thinking about that and thinking definitely because it's an amount of assumed trust, which means we need more people that people can just assume trust with, right? So my question to you all, what are some of the major resources that we need to attract Black educators into the field?
Where do we begin? I think resources inside of the school, I mean, of course, pay. I can attest to that, but not including pay, resources inside of the classroom, like more counselors, more assistants. I think they're called paraprofessionals, just support. Like no one wants to be in a situation like that by themselves. So as long as they see that they have the actual support, I think you'll get a better turnout of Black educators. Because again, like nobody wants to go in like, well, there are some who are like, okay, I'm, who gonna Joe Clark the situation. Right? But everybody not, everybody not about that life. So for those who aren't, get some resources in there and actually listen to what we're telling you or what they're telling you that they need. Like, so you can start with a listening ear and some actual follow-up.
And I will say, in terms of teacher recruitment, that there is a teacher shortage everywhere. There is a teacher shortage everywhere, and that is
about to be even shorter after
2020.
Yep.
See, and that's not my way of saying all teachers matter. Like, that's not to dismiss any of the concerns about Black educators, but as a field, we as a society are in trouble if we do not invest in education as a viable career path, period. So having said that, I think that school districts, if they want to attract more Black educators, they need to make sure that their school in itself is not oppressive. Educators have talked about that, like walking into schools and feeling like they are in jail. Coming into schools and letting me teach the content that I am a subject matter expert in, not wanting me to manage all discipline in sports.
Like, because we can connect, right? With
honor the Black educators as the Black educators. Don't just put them where you need your token Black person in the building to be.
Right. We went to school. We know instruction. We don't just know discipline. So facts on that,
i.e. keeping the kids that you think are problematic in line.
Yes, the ones that you can't connect, or really the ones you can't control, because sometimes it's not about connecting, it's about controlling, which is, again, you can't control a human being. So, and in agreement with that. So I think that's what you guys are saying is really important. So to attract folks to the profession, they got to feel like there are systems of support that already exist within the profession. Because some people right now on the outside looking in like, child would never do that job, right? Or even looking at teachers, if I'm a student, like, Miss So-and-so, How do you do this?
All right, you better than me.
Oh, that's the word right there, girl. You better than me. We know the code for that is like, child, I would never, right? Like that's the code word for that. But for current teachers that are in the profession, do you think there are any specific retention strategies that folks could kind of ramp up on right now?
Absolutely. There's always room for improvement. To remove the oppressive systems that are in place now. Again, support. Like I know so many educators are burnt out now because they don't have that support inside the classroom. And so many, they did a what do you call it? They like gave the statistic numbers or the statistical figures about what our mayor did with our budget this year. And it was almost embarrassing. Like, so I think like over 60% of the money that was allotted to the city of Chicago, the police, what did you call it? The police, they gave it to the police. So here it is. You had the opportunity to make things better and you chose not to. So
you chose system of enforcement and control over systems of rehabilitation and education, which is extremely problematic.
You learn a lot about even their choices.
Sorry, go ahead, Danielle. What did you say?
Oh, just that you learn a lot about people's priorities when you see their choices.
Most
in addition to what Brooke said, the mentorship or community is really important. There are some schools where there are an overwhelming amount of Black teachers. So you become comfortable and you think like every school is like this. Like every school has a lot of Black educators. And that's not the case. So building those ecosystems of people in your school, across your network, or even just in your content area across the globe, that was one of the things that we also wanted to do with the Project 500 podcast. It was created like a global ecosystem. So not just people in Chicago or not just people in the United States, but Black educators everywhere, so that if you were somewhere off in a corner of the world feeling isolated, or if you were in the middle of a small town feeling isolated, or you in Chicago feeling isolated, there might be somebody's story that you can connect with, somebody that you can reach out to build that community and form that mentorship, so that you can have somebody to talk to. I would also say, I wrote down autonomy, encouragement, and acknowledgement. And I think it gets back to what I said before. Like, if you want to attract and retain your Black educators, let them operate in their educational excellence. Like, let them do what you hired,
what you paid them to do.
Like, let them, if they are designing curriculum that is engaging the students and encompass the culture, let them do that. Like, you don't have to come in and micromanage, because again, excellence, if we're making it equitable, then you recognize that the way they do it is probably not the same way you do it.
You doing it.
And you recognize that there's something that you can learn from the way that they are doing it. And there's something you can glean from that approach. So like, support your educators. And I think this is for every educator. This is for every HR department or every administration team. If you want to keep your educators, like, pay attention to them, pour into them. I would suggest even having like a professional development plan for your educator. What does PD look like for you? What do you want to get better in? Are you allowed to showcase your educational expertise outside of the classroom? Like, how are you showcasing the talent that is within your building? Because the teachers are incredibly talented. If you let them shine, they will shine. And when they shine, the kids gonna shine.
Well, you will shine, right? Like, that's the other thing. You as an administrator will shine if your teachers shine.
And your parents will shine.
The community.
And that's another thing that we really wanted to emphasize with the Black full circle, is like, a lot of times, especially in 2020, there were a lot of teacher strikes across the country, a lot of the remote stuff. Teachers were becoming dehumanized. Like, teachers was just like this thing, like, oh, we sick of the teachers are lazy. Oh, the teachers just want more. It's like, hi. That's somebody's sister, somebody's mom, somebody's brother, somebody's nephew, somebody's uncle, somebody's parents, someone's grandparents, someone's auntie. I'm gonna need you to give them that same human respect. Like I understand educate, and that again is why the system is broken. How are people fighting in a system that's designed to support people? how you mad? Like that doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And to hear you say it out loud, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, like it don't make sense. There should be an affirming, mutually beneficial exchange happening here. And if it's not, then I think it's something wrong with the way it's set up.
There's something broken. There's definitely something broken going on there. I don't want to leave this space without the mention of some of the great Black women, right? Because we are in Women's History Month. So I don't want to leave this space without talking about the contributions of some of the great Black women to education. And I know that you guys do something on your platform where you actually been highlighting Black women educators and their contribution to this space. So one, I want to shout out the great Marva Collins. She is heavily talked about for the work that she did in Chicago. So I just would like y'all to share some of the impact of great Black women on the education ecosystem. So who y'all been lifting up over these past couple weeks.
So of course, all the ones that we know. Jadon Hemingway, she's part of the reason why I started Black Educator. She's a cousin and we went to school together as well, but she presented a piece at a conference called what to do when your boss is Black, and she was a principal. So, shout out to her, shout out to Crystal Smith. Like we actually, like, what do you call it? I actually got to know of her through IG. She's doing a phenomenal job, and she's a math teacher. And like from young Black men, they don't do well with math. But when I tell you she breaks that thing on down in the old math and the new math, because we're around the same age, it's just so many. But to Marva Collins, like, I don't think people realize like how much of a force she actually was. The fact that she maintained that school for so long, long.
Years.
And she did it, I'm not going to say by herself, but dang near by herself. So it was just amazing to see.
With $5,000 in a dream, right? Because that's it. That's how it started. $5,000 in her own money.
I think she took it out of
her retirement.
Yeah, out of her retirement. I was going to say 401k, but that wasn't around.
It wasn't around back then. They got a little events.
So she took it out of her, and that's how much she believed in Black children, and how awesome she knew that we could grow if we just had the opportunity to. So yeah, shout out to Marva Collins. Like, and I was asking my mom about her yesterday, and from what I knew, the school was started on the west side. And she was like, "No, baby, that school on the south side." I was like, "Oh, excuse me." Like, so, like when you don't hear about her a lot, but people know about Marva Collins. And I guess, because she was such a pioneer in the Chicagoland area, and she wasn't even from here. Like, she was born in Alabama. So for you to give Chicago so much love, like, that was amazing to me.
And to have that person that believes. I know you guys also do a thing called Thank a Teacher. So I definitely want to invite Thank a Black Teacher. Yes. let me yes, we ain't thinking her. We're thinking our Black teachers right now. Today's a celebration for them. So what I would love folks who are watching to do is, if you could please comment in the chat, thank a Black teacher in the chat. Tag them if you are friends with the Black teacher that you feel like is doing phenomenal work, a Black teacher that influenced your life, because I know I'm friends with some of my old teachers from back in the day. But please tag them to this post and thank them for the work that they are doing. Please give these people their roses, whether they're here or not. But please comment in the chat and thank a Black teacher. And Brooke and Danielle, I'll give y'all the opportunity right now live to go ahead and thank somebody who you feel like has been influential and impactful.
I'll go first. I want to thank my mother. She is a speech pathologist who retired after 30 years in the Maywood Board of Education. My sister is a music teacher. My father, who has passed on, was a driving instructor, which is why I'll be wheeling and dealing. Brooke, no, I could parallel park anywhere. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. So, when I say Black educators, I mean anybody who has ever supported the learning of a Black child and even a Black person, because we learn as grown-ups every day. So definitely want to thank my family. And then from my own educational experience, I didn't have my first Black teacher until I was in 6th grade when I moved to the city of Chicago, because I am from Bolingbrook. When I moved to the city and went to a public school for the first time, I had my first Black teacher, Miss Elliott. She wore her hair natural. She wore it in a poof. When I first went natural, I used to always wear my hair in a poof because I felt like that was the standard natural hairstyle. This was before YouTube, and I could learn about twist outs and all those things. So I had a classic little poof. But she made me feel so smart. I'm really, really shy on the inside. Brooke knows this. I know, man. I play a thug on TV, but in real life, I am so soft and so shy. And she encouraged me to speak. She encouraged me to find my voice. And she told me I was smart. She told me I was a good writer. And I believed her. I believed her. So that's the Black educator that I would like to thank. Thank you, Miss Elliott, for helping me find my voice. And now I'm going to keep on using it.
Yes, shout out to Miss Elliott. Look what you built, sis.
Yeah, that's what we did.
Brooke, who you thanking?
So I have a bunch, but I'm gonna make this short. The first Black educator that I saw with my own eyes, and like I said, I've been fortunate enough to constantly see them, was when I went to Beasley, and I started in the 3rd grade. I didn't start at 1st grade when they offered, but Miss Ollie McLemore. She was the principal. And when I tell you Miss McLemore used to dress to the nines, like she was like Black excellence personified. Like I had never seen anything like it. She was, an older lady, but her hair was blonde, like it was always done, not a hair out of the place. But she would talk to us like she knew us, like she loved us, like constantly affirming, how smart we were. And we had this pledge that we had to do every single morning. I will repeat it for y'all, but I don't want to look like, I don't want to look like a sucker, but
I told you, look a proud Beasley bee.
I am with every fiber in my being. But like Dr. McLemore, like she was amazing. Like she was the first person who I saw like, okay, like even if I didn't pursue a career in education, like I knew like, okay, a Black woman running this, like I can run my own. Whatever I decide it should be, I could run it. So shout out to Dr. McLemore.
Yes. And I just want to give a quick thank you to, of course, you, Danielle, my family first. My mom, Vera Terrell, out there. Woo! And then my older sisters, Avis, Erica, and Cara Terrell. So being my first teachers in the home. But I had the luxury of my education, especially in elementary, starting out by being led by a bunch of brown women, some wonderful Hispanic women. So shout out to Sylvia Lugo, who was my kindergarten teacher, who built my relationship and love of school because she was so loving, so affirming, and so sweet. And then shout out to Sharon Batts and Joe Shepard, my middle school teachers, who helped us believe in ourselves and let us know that the sky was the limit. So thank you and shout out to them. We are coming up on time. So Brooke and Danielle, I want to give you guys just a final word that you want to say before I close out the show.
Brooke, go ahead. Tell them where they can find us.
Of course. So on IG, Black Educators Matter, or blackeducators.matter. If you have any questions for us, you can go to the website, www.blackeducatorsmatter.org. You can hit us up there. And if you are a teacher and you have not told your story yet, make sure you sign up for Project 500 so you can talk to Danielle.
Come talk to me.
Yes, go talk to these ladies. Please support these ladies as we help expand this education ecosystem. We got co-conspirators all over the world. And these two dynamic young ladies are one of them. So we appreciate them. Of course,
inviting us.
Thank you, Shayna.
Oh, thanks for having it. Like y'all dope. We got to do something else again in the future. Y'all are dope and y'all are doing phenomenal work. And of course, shout out to the Center for Black Educator Development. You can find us on our website. Right now, our Freedom Schools Literacy Academy is open for parents of kids for rising first through third graders, so K2 that are currently right now. We also have open apprenticeships for high school and college students, paid apprenticeships. So please check out our website and apply, especially if you know some Black college students. We still have some slots open. Connect me to some HBCUs with some Black college students who are looking. We have in-person and virtual sites. So please support Freedom Schools Literacy Academy. And again, you could go on our Academies page on our website to find out more. As always, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to Building the Black Educator Pipeline. And shout out to the ladies for joining us today. This was an excellent conversation. I'll see you guys back here next week.